Well, it's nice to see so many familiar people here. I really appreciate it. Thanks for new people that have come. Thanks for giving me your time and attention. Just by way of introduction, I'll just tell you a little bit of my story. I started out in the dog training business. It was our family business. My dad was a trainer during World War II. He actually started in the Coast Guard, but he wanted always to be into dogs. When he was a kid, he had a dog. I can't remember the dog's name now that I think about it. And everywhere he took his dog, and it was the best trained dog in town. He thought it was really important that his dog put out a good presentation. And so I grew up in that business. And in those days, my father was trainer to the stars. In fact, he was the National Geographic Book of Dogs. So he's kind of the Cesar Millan of the era. Of course, it was a lot smaller media going on in those days. But anyhow, all the movie stars would come to our house, and people, in those days, nobody trained their dog. Only the mega wealthy trained their dogs. They sent them off to, my dad's place called Canine College. So they sent their dog off to boarding school like they sent their kids off. So I met the Johnsons of Johnsons & Johnsons, the Strausses of Levi Strauss, and that was the clientele. So when I started working there, of course I worked after school, chores and all that kind of thing. We were like farmers, and every day there was a whole bunch of chores to do. It was all dogs. And I didn't have a romantic vision of dogs. To me, dogs were work and trouble. Problems, everything was a disaster. It was always my fault. So I never would turn to a dog for companionship. It never occurred to me. They were just, customers had dogs, but I didn't have a dog. Of course, we had family dogs and everything, but the idea of my own dog never made sense to me. It didn't occur to me. But at any rate, I got into the business, and there's ribbons on the wall. My dad was a big-time dog trainer, won many bird dog competitions, and he was big in the security business. He was the first trainer to begin police dogs in the Northeast, at least in the East Coast. And so we had trophies and ribbons, and like I say, the world's elite coming to the doors. I had no questions. I thought everything was completely explained. His theory was, much like Cesar Millan's, a pack theory, that human society was organized just like, or I should say canine society was organized just like human society. You had to have a leader and followers. And so that made total sense to me. While I was working and doing things, I started to notice it was odd, but the puppies, when we'd have a litter of German Shepherd puppies, could do whatever they wanted to the adults. And meanwhile, we were telling dog owners to right away discipline their puppies and teach them respect for the owner. And yet I noticed that the adult dogs didn't do it when they were really, really young. They got to a certain age, they did, but not when they were young, not when they were formative or anything like that. I also noticed that male dogs were always being typed as the most dominant, and therefore that's why they were the most aggressive. And yet in any mixed sex household of dogs, the female dog always ran the male dog. It was never the other way around. Even more oddly, the little dog always ran the big dog. Even though in a litter of puppies, the big dog, the bigger puppy was getting all the food and bullying the little guys. And then most incongruently, the cat, in any menagerie of animals in a house, always ran the dogs. Well, I should say, if the dog didn't kill the cat ran the dog. And at first, one might think that a contradiction, and I hope to show to you how those are both complementary states. So I started to have questions. Things didn't add up. And in one particular case was a protection dog we were training, and we start in a barn. And my dad was a master of the squeaky stairwell, where we kept tools, and it went from the downstairs garage area to the upstairs horse stall area. And we would, if a dog came in for training, we'd sequester him in the barn. And then after he's there for a week or two, the boogeyman would start calling and make suspicious noises. And never in direct view. It was very stealthy and spooky. And little by little, we'd work our way up to the grand entrance, up the squeaky staircase. And it was like the scene in Private Ryan where you'd hear the helper, the decoy we used to call him, or agitator, creeping up the staircase, the boards squeaking, and then all of a sudden there was where very slowly a doorknob would turn on the door, and then the door would creak open, and the dog is like staring at the door, and I'm the handler, I'm standing right next to the door, and there's like sweat stains on the floor if the dog shifted his weight, and nothing happened, nobody came up. And then all of a sudden, blam, this explosion of sound goes, as the helper ran down the stairwell and disappeared back into the mist. And the dog's like, wow, what was that? And so it went step by step like that. And eventually, the boogeyman made an appearance. It would be my dad with this tattered coat, worthy of Jason the 13th or whatever, Friday. And when it came time to give the dog the bite, and many days later, my dad would run by the dog, and a little bit of tattered hem of the raincoat would drift into range, and the dog would grab this little bit of fabric and rip it and be left with just this shred of fabric in his mouth. My dad's gone down the staircase. So we built up, and the next thing you know, it's a heavier jute thing, and he's biting harder, then he's fighting for it, and then we work him up to his sleeve. And it was like Swiss clockmaking. Every step of the way was, what's it like to be that dog? What's going on inside that dog? What's that dog feeling? What's up for the dog? And we were just working it beautifully. So he's finally biting the sleeve. And the day finally arrived that he had to learn out. To bite the sleeve, he's got to let go of the sleeve at some point. Usually we just leave him with it. But now the final piece is be put into the clock. We're going to set it into the bezel today. So my dad, we arrange it and we do the whole thing. The dog gets the bite. Now, meanwhile, I had taught the dog to fetch a dumbbell. I had taught him I'm the leader. I had taught him he'll sit down, stay, and I proofed him around the horses and the cows. I did all that good stuff as preliminary. And I took him for walks, and he seemed to like me. And so he's biting the sleeve, and my dad is fighting him, and then my dad goes still, and I'm supposed to tell him out, and I tell him out, and he still grips, he's still holding it. So dad says, you gotta yell louder. So I start yelling louder, out, out, and my dad starts yelling at me, and we're like fighting each other, and he finally says, take the end of the leash and whack him on the snout. So finally I do, and I just belt him right on the snout, and he like winces, and he comes off, and he sits by my side, and I can just feel him ebbing away. And I said, something doesn't make sense here. I don't get this. This was the final spot, and now the dog is confused, and he has no energy. Now, I did not know what to do with that, but I knew I was confused. I didn't get it. Why didn't that dog let go? Everything we did was perfect. Everything went exactly as my dad told me it was going to go, and it did. When we got to the final spot, he fell apart, the dog fell apart. It felt like I betrayed the dog. I turned on the dog. I'm supposed to be on his side, and he's on my side, and then all of a sudden I'm fighting against him. We're supposed to be working together. So I did not know what to do with that other than being confused. And I gained a very valuable lesson that day. I call it trust the confusion. We all have a compass, but it's broken. However, it points reliably south towards confusion. So if you're ever confused, don't ever lose that feeling, because it's telling you something's off, and you'll know north when you know it, but at least you know where confusion is. And what I like to say is trust the confusion. Now you know how dogs feel. So that was the moral of that story. And what followed from there was I started questioning everything. Now, how does a dog know sit when I say sit? What does he do this? What does he do that? What's going on? But I knew I couldn't ask anybody, because if you start questioning first principles in dogdom, people get really mad at you. You get everybody's hackles up. So you couldn't actually do this free form exploration of questioning. I think this is a nicer generation going on now that there's a little more collegiality in the trade than there was when I was coming through. It was pretty dog eat dog. So there's a lot of cross-pollination I'd noticed going on between people, which is really good. But I one day had an epiphany. I was going to work to start the kennel. Now, I should say that I just went on business as usual, and somehow we repaired the dog. We got him working again. We got things going. It looked really, really good to an observer's point of view. We eventually did learn to let go. But I could always see a trace of conflict in the dog. There's a little seed there that I knew it didn't go away. And again, that sustained my confusion. So I really wanted to figure out what is going on for these dogs. And one day I was going to work to the kennel, and I had a bunch of ideas in my mind. One was, my dad had mentioned, you know, dogs don't fight to protect the owner. They fight to protect themselves. If they could get away, they'd get away, and it wouldn't occur to them the owner couldn't get away. Why wouldn't, you know, if you see a pack of wolves, if there's a grizzly bear, if one can get away, they all can get away, they all get away. They don't stop to protect the den against the grizzly bear. If you can get away, you get away. Even if you win the fight, you're likely to be damaged and injured, and there's no vet in nature. So he says that's why we have to protection train these dogs, so that they'll stand and fight. Otherwise, if they can get away, why can't the owner get away? And that made a lot of sense to me from what I knew of dogs, and I realized, that means a dog can only know his point of view, can never know any other point of view but his own. And then I was opening the door, ready to start the day, and another thing came into my mind. I said, whenever I'm really emotional, I only know my point of view. If I'm really upset, I don't care what Dad's going to say later. I'm still going to do it. Or if I'm angry, or if I'm depressed, or whatever it is, I don't care. So the more emotional I was, the less I could entertain other perspectives. And then it also followed from that means emotion is in the immediate moment. Not only can I not know another point of view, but I can't know a point of view in the future in reference to a point of view in the past. I'm in the moment. Which means that those are the two same things. My ability to know your point of view and my ability to know my point of view in the future are really the same phenomenon. So I grasped that emotion was an immediate moment phenomena, and the final piece to it was, it's a function of attraction. It's all attraction. Everything we see behavior do is attraction, not intention. And this is the big disconnect between the human intellect and the animal mind. The animal mind has no idea how anything happens when it happens. It's what he feels when what happens. That gives him his construct of reality. So I want to work our way into that understanding, an immediate moment theory of attraction, and start analyzing behavior in terms of the immediate moment attraction. In other words, aggression is a function of attraction. Sexuality is a function of attraction. Fear is a function of attraction. And I'll lay out a few markers. Emotion is a function of attraction, and you can only be attracted to what is good, positive. There's no such thing as a negative emotion. And this was my metric by which I could analyze in a new way of looking at things. And I am here to report that I'm no longer confused. I think this is right. I feel this is right. And it's testable in your own experience. And I'd like to give you a few exercises that you can do. There's certain times, activities where our animal mind is running the show. And you can take advantage of that to parse apart emotion from instinct, from feelings, from thought. Those are 4 distinct things. But if you read any treatment on behavior, even high-level treatment on human psychology, no one makes a distinction between emotion and instinct or feelings and thought. They kind of all blur together. Because the only way we can imagine at this moment that feelings have value is if we add intellectual content, concepts to it. How could it be valuable? A quick little example you can test for yourself is when you're listening to music, you're in a pure state of feeling. You don't have to be thinking anything, and yet you're having a very rich emotional experience based on feeling. And you feel every instrument inflects feeling. And that's what gives you the richness of the experience. And you don't have to be thinking whatsoever. Matter of fact, if you are thinking, you're not in it. It'll mitigate how good it is. So emotion is always a function of attraction. If you see a dog that wants to kill a cat, he's so attracted to that cat. He's attracted to that cat with more energy than he can move. And that's why people say hates. But there's no such thing as hate in nature, which is why we say there's a thin line between hate and love, because that's the only way we can approximate that, which is speaking close to the truth. So emotion can only feel good or positive. Let me just make that distinction. And the other metric is, therefore, a true feeling can only feel good. So problem behavior is blocked emotion and not feeling good. That's all. Any problem behavior you see, it's all that. And to go back to the attraction, aggression equals blocked attraction. Sexual equals turning resistance to attraction back into attraction. Fear equals collapse of a state of attraction. So what this means is there's only one emotion, attraction. There are not 7 emotions, even though Pansep says there's 7 emotional module systems. That's mechanics stuff. But underlying, every one of his systems functions on attraction. So attraction is deeper than anything going on in the brain. This also brings the body into the mind, these concepts. Integrate the body and the mind. My expression to sum it up is the body plugs the brain into the mind. There's actually a medical condition, I forget the name of it, or it's too hard to pronounce, where patients report losing sensation way down in their lower hip area, their pelvic area, and it slowly travels up, and when it hits their throat, they pass out. And to me, I visualize it as like pulling the plug on the body, and whoop, the mind's gone. And again, if you want to know what emotion is, it's always based on attraction. If you want to know what a feeling is, it always feels good. You could listen to sad, morbid music, Mozart's Requiem, something morose and melancholy, still feel good. It's a true feeling. You still feel pleasure when you are listening to that sad music. Even after a difficult situation, you might revisit that music and you still feel good because it's a true feeling. So that became my metric. Emotion was positive, feelings are good. And that allowed me to parse out what the dog was doing. And the synthesis of all that is I want to give you a very simple way of looking at training and being physical with a dog. Since the body is integral to the mind, if you want to affect your dog's mind, you really have to access through the body. But if we look at what we do as dog owners, we want to be intellectual, conceptualized, verbalized. We want to talk at the dog. It's very static. We talk to the dog and we expect him to perform. And the goal of this weekend's workshop is to agitate your dog and see if, as an owner, you can calm him with your touch. That he can totally melt into your hand no matter what's going on around him. That would be the gold standard. The greatest thing that ever happened to me as a dog trainer was I came down from my house. I was in my bedroom and I got up to go downstairs for some reason, and the night light was out and it was pitch black, And I walked down, and I walked on the runner over the carpet, the pathway to the kitchen. And next thing I know, I'm like, almost go flying. And unbeknownst to me, I'd put my full weight on my dog's chest. Heshed, my shepherd, I put my whole weight on his chest. He never did anything. And I almost went flying, and then I staggered over, I hit the light, and he's just looking at me. I said, wow, that's really cool. I almost broke my neck, and he didn't even get up. That's fantastic. So if you can move, I call it not leaving a wake. If you can move through your dog's perceptual field and not ripple his mind, that would be a Zen moment. That's what our goal is. It's very hard to do. That's what cats are good for. They're very good exercise in humility in that regard, you know. Can you open that door and let your cat out without distracting them? So this is an immediate moment way of looking at the dog. And one window into that thing is I could ask the question, now the newborn puppy is blind and deaf for the first 10 days. He can't regulate his body temperature. He can't urinate or defecate on his own, right? So for 10 days, his higher brain levels are flat. Yet now they've done experiments where they put a little bit of citric acid on the mother's nipple. And for the rest of that dog's life, he loved the taste of bitter apple. That's supposedly noxious. But because he got imprinted with mother's milk during those first 10 days, that formed a lifelong imprint. So we can say with authority that an imprint is happening in those first 10 days. So my question would be to ask ourselves, what's his impression of his mother in those first 10 days? What is his impression? What does he experience his mother as? You know, if you look at the puppy, 6 months old, we bring him back to the litter and the breeder and the mother and the puppy. We instantly conceptualize it's the mother, it's the son, daughter. They have some kind of maternal filial relationship, recognition. And I would challenge that. I would say that doesn't actually make sense. They don't actually have a concept that they could frame relationships into. Brother, sister, spouse, mate, mother, offspring. You know, they don't have that. That wouldn't make any sense to an animal. Especially if we look at the research on emotion. Pansep says, if you're discussing emotion in verbal terms, you're way off track. If you're doing body language of a dog in complete human sentences, that can't be right. So if we see a play bow and we say the dog is inviting another dog to play, that can't be true. Because the emotion's pre-verbal, before there was ever the concept of verbalization. In fact, Damasio, the world's foremost neurobrain researcher, says emotion began with bacteria. The drive, homeostasis, to keep well-being of the organism, to keep the organism whole. So the question is, what does the puppy imagine, feel, think his mother is? Now as we get to that, I want to say that all dog training systems, natural dog training as well, believes that animals learn by reinforcement. By the way, if you have any questions, feel free to interject. What I'd like to do is break this word down, take away the suffixes, prefixes, take away the suffix. That leaves us with force. Not force as a verb, but force as a noun. So the operative part of the word reinforcement is force. So if we revisit the question, what does the puppy perceive his mother as? I would say as a force. He can't see her, he can't hear her, but she's knocking him all over the room, cleaning him, always bowling him over. He must feel like he's in a dryer on spin cycle. Have you ever seen a newborn puppy with a mother? I mean, she's knocking him and he's flying all over the place. Ah, ah, he's screaming. He's trying to move, but his rear end is dead weight. He's clawing. In fact, that's why breeders have to build a whelping box, because he's going to drift away into the cold and you'll find a dead puppy in the morning if the mother doesn't track it. So the mother is an invisible force. In other words, his template, it begins as a turbulence. She knocks him all over the place. He's screaming. He's breathing rapid, bah, 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 mostly pushing air. It ends with him nestled at the mama's belly, nursing, soon to go back into dreamland, back to the weightlessness of the womb from whence he came, which we could call flow. So what we're going to talk about this weekend is everything begins, a stimulation, a stimulus, is perceived by the dog as a force acting on his body, literally knocking him off balance, challenging his capacity to stand still, to stand upright. That's why a dog will run across a road and bite the mailman. Because at 100 feet, that mailman is exerting a force on him. And the dog is the only animal that carries that that very simple imprint of force being turbulent, getting to flow, that has something to do with biting, the oral urge. This is the simplest system of the animal mind. And we can look at the evolution of the wolf that begat the dog and the domestication process of the dog. This simple, basic code is magnified in the dog's makeup, unlike any other animal. When the force gets too great for the experience, all animals have this very same imprint, but when the force goes above a certain threshold, all other animals revert to instincts, which are do what worked once, long time ago. Stick with the script. That's why they can't adapt. That's why we don't have a cat conference here today. Nobody could bring their kitties. And please never bring your pet chimp to a chimp conference. It won't end well. He will kill us. Right? That's also why you don't protection train cheetahs and lions or house cats, because you're going to turn them into psychopathic killers. But the dog, we can actually train a police dog to sink his teeth into human flesh so hard, crushing everything, and yet he gets friendlier with people that aren't bad people. No other animal can do it. It's completely taken for granted in the behavioral world. No one looks at that and says, wow, learning theory doesn't account for that. Dominance theory doesn't account for that. Nothing accounts for that. And that's what compelled me to try to figure that out, because it didn't make any sense. Why are dogs so social, so sexual? I mean, look at YouTube. They'll hump anything. And so aggressive. You are not going to get, the cat goes out and gets a bird. It's time to hit the couch and sleep it off for a day or two. But you could have a dog hunting bird all day long. I think the world record for a pit bull killing rats, I don't know who did this, but it's like thousands. Boom, boom, boom. They got thousands together. They actually have contests for that. Yeah. Sorry. But in medieval England, when the pit bull thing started, they actually cataloged how many dogs it took to kill this or to kill that. It took 2 dogs to kill a lion. It took 4 dogs to kill a chimp. They actually quantified every animal in terms of that. But they weren't doing that with badgers or wolverines or grizzly bears. Only the dog is that aggressive, and yet that social. So in this model, it makes total sense. Those 3 supposedly different things. If I'm approaching a dog, I am pushing a wall of energy at him. Now, I'm not meaning a literal energy. He's summoning up the experience from physical memory that's in the cells of his body. He's reliving. So the way I like to explain memory, when I usually explain the immediate moment theory, the first objection is, well, then they have memory. That doesn't make any sense. They can remember. Therefore, how could it be immediate moment? And the way I sum it up is they can't remember, but they never forget. And they have a special kind of memory called physical memory. I call it physical memory. And it means it needs to be triggered by this exact same level of intensity that caused it in the first place. So whenever, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is visualize your dog's body-mind as a pipe. Sorry. Oh. That's proto-dog. So, yeah, now this is proto-dog. I mean, this is when plasma was just coalescing, so I get a pass on that. So, to add a little more complexity to it, most people are focusing on the brain. And I'm saying that this is just one part of the dynamo. It's not the most important part. It's just an aspect. In fact, it's not the most important part. But it's concerned with balance. So everybody is looking for cognition here, and I say let's put that aside for a while. We're not going to get very far if we go there. But there's another brain called the enteric brain nervous system. So you have the enteric. We're all familiar with the big brain, central nervous system. This is called the emotional brain, or the little brain in the gut. And that's the other. So I visualize these as two poles of the body-mind, just like a battery has two poles. So you have emotion going through the pipe. It's only interested in attraction. And it's only attracted to what I call essence. And we could add another word to it, prey essence. But the easiest way to see that is whatever your dog smells is essence. It's anything to do with the body. Scents, feces, urine, blood, flesh, carrion. It's also freshly disturbed earth. It's also fresh dew, snow, which I think are negative ions, which is essence. However, life is characterized by resistance. There's resistance between the dog and what he wants. If there's a $20 bill over there, I mean, it's going to take me work. There's work I have to go over to get that $20. Not much work, but my theory is that the resistance records a physical memory of the experience. And it goes back into the hopper as what I call unresolved emotion or stress. And this is a physical record of the experience. It's encoded in the body. The dog does not have autonomous access to physical memory. It needs to be triggered by a negative. The negative is the opposite of the positive in that it's a predatory aspect. So if we look at a positive, it's anything of the body, the essence, scent, saliva, tears, musk, feces, urine, anything. It's also a rhythmic motion. So if you see an animal moving, it's very pleasing. That's the essence of the animal. We like to watch animals move, especially four-legged. We like to watch people dance, especially couples. The more rhythm, the more essence we're seeing, and the more we like to watch water flow, fire crackle. The flow of energy is essence. So that soothes us. That makes us reconnect with emotion as a pipe. We feel whole when we do that. However, stress is it's the equal opposite of emotion. Unlike emotion, which is temporary, transitory, It's like the river in the water in the river. It's completely gone, instantly gone. It always needs to be replenished. Stress, on the other hand, is cumulative. It builds up. It's stored, and every bit of resistance goes back in the hopper and builds up. Now, this is important to us to understand dog behavior, because you might meet a dog that had nothing but so-called positive experiences his whole life. And then when he hits age 2 years old, he freaks out. That's when the battery won't hold any more energy. And it's triggered by something negative. Anyhow, this is physical memory. They never forget. Now, yes, ma'am.
Do you mind, just before
Sure.
you said stress is cumulative.
Cumulative.
Just before that you said what just continues to need to be replenished.
Emotion. It's like the water in a river, right? You don't get rain for a while, pretty soon the river's drained. Right. So every system in nature needs a battery. So we talked about the body-mind as a pipe, but the body-mind's also a battery. Stress is the memory of experience. And it's also stored energy that'll build up force. We're back to force to get work done, to overcome greater sources of resistance. So my point being, your dog sees you as a source of force. That's the number one thing he sees you as, a source of force. And the question is, what are we going to do with that force? That is the key to success. So, we hear today a lot about high-value reinforcers. So the dominant theory would say, well, the highest value reinforcement is praise from a pack leader. And a force-free, which I always find kind of an oxymoron, force-free trainer would say, well, it's a smelly piece of cheese. It's a high-value a rotted fish, you know. That's going to really motivate your dog. But I would like to give you a different way of metric. The more force, quantity of force is transferred in a moment, the more that behavior was reinforced. In other words, if a dog wants to go for my glove and I smack him, I transferred a lot of force. I just reinforced his need to go to that glove. He may never go after that glove in my presence again, but that's in the hopper and it's going to come out somewhere. For example, a lot of dogs chase deer and they never catch them. They might get hit by a car chasing a deer, and yet deer chasing is always reinforced. And the reason is, not only was a lot of force transferred, the dog got to run for 20 minutes all out, exhaust himself, but he moved it moved very well. He got to run all out. So the quantity, the more quantity, and the better the movement, the more the behavior got. That's the gold standard. In other words, if your dog can move a lot of force through you, to you and through you well, you are the highest reinforcer in his perceptual makeup. That's really important to understand. And that's going to bring us back to, yes. If you can be the greatest source of force that your dog can overcome, let me put it that way. If you can be the strongest object of resistance that he has to exert the most amount of force to overcome, and he does it by moving really well, just like he's chasing a deer for 200 miles, you are the, well, let me make that 200 yards. You are the number one reinforcer in his world. He'll see a deer and he'll feel a pull to you. That's what I learned in police dog training, as a matter of fact. We never trained police dogs to come when called. Never did. I never trained a police dog to come when called. My dogs are working off leash in the middle of the night on the meridian of the Mare Parkway, orbiting the handler. naturally picking up the boundaries of the traffic and finding an Alzheimer's patient or a bad guy. Yet we did no exercise on come when called, stick here to handler. The dog associated biting the hell out of me to decoy with the handler. Therefore, he moved the most amount of force well. We never taught him not to chase deer. We never used electric collar. All we did when he was 2 weeks, when the cop came to see the dog, we played hide and seek in the woods. That was it. Then the cop took him for car rides. It was really hard to explain to the police department why they should pay that cop to come for 2 weeks just to play hide and seek with a dog in the woods. But that was the foundation. The dog was hunting down the handler. He's moving a lot of force well. And then we moved to bite work, and then the dog just naturally worked close to the handler. There was no issue. And that's another thing that with my dad's training is he was the area's greatest sport dog trainer. The rich people came from all over. In those days, Connecticut was very rural. And I'd help them train the dogs. And we had a great big chicken coop with pheasants, quail, pigeons. Amazing place to go in as kids. And you could take a pigeon, and my dad taught me, you tuck his head under the wing, and you shake him real fast. He's unconscious. And then you put him under a bush, you keep his head tucked, and then we get the dog, and we bring him into the wind, and whoa, there's the bird, and you help him with his point, whoa, and then I would wake up the bird would take off, my dad would shoot him, the dog would fetch it. And I realized, we're not doing heel sit down out here. We're just hiding the bird. We know where the bird is, and the dog doesn't. And then we're right in position when he occurs to him. So I started wondering, why aren't we doing dominance to show the bird how to hunt? But we didn't do any obedience with that dog. We didn't have to. All we had to do was know where the prey was. And once again, that was the most amount of force, moving very well. It had nothing to do with attaining leadership or heel sit down or any of that kind of thing. So that's what I was doing with the police dogs. We never did any basic obedience to get to the final product. I mean, they had to do basic obedience so they could walk through the streets and be nice doggies, but it was just a tack on, just something we tacked on. It wasn't foundational, it wasn't important. The most important thing was how hard he bit that sleeve. Would he fight? Would he put up a fight and overcome the resistance? And was he feeling good while he did it? And that was technique. How do we keep the dog feeling good while he's doing this so he's not having a bad experience? So I want to talk about moving force well. So would you agree with me? So if a dog is moving well, it's characterized, very sorry, by two, when a dog's running all out, it's called a rotary gallop. Whoops. And it's characterized by two distinct phases. One is projection of force forward, where all four legs are totally extended. The other is collection of force inward, so the body is gathered over all four legs are tucked under the body in preparation for the next explosion. Now that's moving as fast as the animal can, and it's a very efficient gait. He can move as far as possible for the least amount of energy. Now would you agree with me that everything about an organism evolved to maximize a state of well-being? Would that seem reasonable to say? I mean, could a kidney cell evolve to be a thorn in the side of the rest of the kidney? Could the heart evolve to be counterproductive to the pancreas? Everything has to serve to maintain or maximize a state of well-being. So, would you agree that moving as fast as possible away from something you fear, or as fast as possible towards something you want, would be the optimal response you could do in any given situation and maintain or maximize your well-being? I would say yes. And hopefully you would agree. And we've established that every cell in the body evolved to maintain that. But that also means the mind of the body, that the mind that moves the body, also is subscribing to the same metric of well-being. So what I discovered with police dogs was there's a mechanics to moving well and therefore a state of well-being. And that a problem dog, the reason he's a problem dog is in any given situation, he doesn't feel he can move well. And he starts to lock up. Primarily, his shoulders tighten, and he starts either holding his breath or hyperbreathing. And that's his predictor, something bad's going to happen. And if he were not to experience that, then that bad thing would become a good thing. You could actually change the value of it because it could move a lot of force very well, just as well as it could be a lot of force that can't move. And what we discover is we have the projection of force and the collection of force. And what we actually have are the rotation of the shoulders along a circle, a rotation. That is the metric of moving well, is the shoulders are loose and can rotate. So for example, and one thing I'd like to do if we get a chance is do a lot of talk about the body language of dogs, what's going on when they're interacting. But if you see two dogs playing really well, you'll notice their shoulders are mirroring each other. They're rotating on all planes and all axes. And they're barely even touching. When they're really playing well, I mean, they're running by each other and they're gripping and tumbling, but they're barely touching each other because they're perfectly mirroring. And we'll get into what that means, but you could compare it to Nadal versus Federer in a tennis match. We were really talking about one emotional body being composed by two bodies into one mind. So Federer, no, he can feel. He sees Nadal about to do this, and Federer is completely mirroring it. And they're forming two mirror images along a common axis, the trajectory of the ball. That is the essence of canine body language. It's exactly the same thing. The movement of force with the shoulders perfectly adapting to absorb that force and then to project it back and leverage the force. So, I've developed 5 core exercises. One is pushing, where the dog learns he can give all his force to the human. He can project all his might to the human, and the human will absorb it. So that's pushing. The other one, another one is collecting, where the exact opposite happens. The human organizes it so the dog absorbs all the human energy. And why is the back and forth important? Which will speak again to why are dogs the most social animal on earth, is your coupling force. If you're going back and forth, you can amplify force, which means you can do more work, which means sociability is force coupling, which is why dogs are so sexual. It's got nothing to do with dominance. It's only tertiarily got anything to do with procreation. Its fundamental purpose is force coupling, to do more work. When I say work, I mean make more social energy. That's actually what, what I'm saying is social behavior comes first. It's not something you have to teach. It's already in the system. And if you couple your force to the dog and magnify it. So one of the problems I run into in dog training working with clients is it's too static. Like I said, they're intellectual, they want to tell the dog what to do, they want the dog to respond. But it's really like giving a kid a ride on a swing. You know, you have to first you got to get it going. And then little by little you can add more force. Until finally, when you get the system maximized, you can keep it going just with a little flick of your finger. It takes very little to amplify force at that point. So when you start working with green dogs, we're doing all the work. We got to get the thing going. But once you get force going, then you can start, the dog starts doing all the work. And it's not work to the dog at this point. He's flying. These two phases at full speed are characterized by all 4 feet off the ground. It's a state of suspension. That's a state of weightlessness. That is the reason, that's when a dog knows he's doing the right thing, when he feels weightless. And that's another physical memory. Yes?
Can you give an example of like what push-pull might look like?
Oh yeah. What I do, I start with food. So this will be the little mantra. First, will the dog take food? By the way, don't feed your dogs anymore today because we're going to use food tomorrow. So make sure your dogs are hungry. Will the dog just take food from your hand? If he'll do that, will he follow you while he takes food? If he'll do that, will he jump up on you and take food chest high? If he'll do that, can you massage his neck while you do that? You might keep moving back. If he'll do that, can you push him away and he push back and drives you more until finally, I mean, you can put, it should be like a football game. He's just like pounding to get in there. That's your goal.
Like with a toy, like when they tug, would a toy, would that be similar, or is it just with
tug would be the opposite of that, where he is, for most, like you're talking about your dog? Okay, does your dog growl when he tugs?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that means he's coming unglued. He's starting to feel a disconnect with his body. And he's summoning up more energy to sustain the contact. So what we're going to do is teach push-a-war, so there's no noise. If you see 2 dogs play with unbelievable affection and abandon, there's no sound. I mean, they're not making a sound. So whenever you hear noise, there's a leak, right? It's a leak. Like you drive in your car and you feel a shimmy in the wheel, that's a leak. Or you hear the car doing something that shouldn't be doing, that's a leak. So energy's not going to the wheels. You're losing it somewhere along the line. So yeah, that's why tug of war got a bad name, because people were frying the circuits and the dog feels he's losing. The good thing is you're creating an investment in that toy. So now we want to maximize it. So that's a very good starting point. So what he's trying to do is collect, but it's too much work. It's hard for him. That's why he's growling. But it's a great starting place. So if your dog will play tug no matter what, it's really easy to keep going. That's fantastic. So we can see the shoulders in this, the thrust in this dog are 2 different directions. Another behavior is bark on command. And the reason this became really important to me is I was the only guy in the Northeast who adopted the German minimal force method. I was introduced to it through Schutzen, and you're always training with German cops, and they explain it that it made total sense. If the criminal gives up, if a criminal shoots 5 cops, but he says, I give up, cops can't shoot him. They got to read him his rights, arrest him, and book him. Even though 5 of their buddies have been shot, they still can't shoot the guy if he gave up. So how come your American police dogs can go around the corner and bite the guy who's ready to give up? If the guy's not moving, the dog should hold him at bay. He should not bite someone who's not moving. Then they said, you know, practically speaking, this is really good because you can send your dog off leash and he can work hundreds of yards away from the handler. And nobody has to be there to tell the dog what to do. And in America, if the dog went out of sight, the cop had to call the dog back because he didn't know what the hell was going to happen once he's out of sight. So I started teaching hold at bay, and I discovered if I got a really clean bark where the breath out was matched by the sucking in, and it was like a perfect bark. It was deep, rhythmic, and whole body resonating. The dog could hold at bay no matter what, that it moved as much energy as the bite. Then I had a perfect out, and we could trust the dog off leash. We caught one criminal after a high-speed chase, lights and sirens, shots fired, dogs dispatched into the night, climbs a cliff and catches the guy and holds him for 30 minutes till the cop finally could get up there with all his gear on to get up there and arrest the guy. I think, boy, was that guy happy to see that cop, too. But all he could hear was bah, 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 bah. The dog was feeling he was running at full speed. The breath, I mentioned the breath earlier, he was breathing as if he were running. Therefore, he was moving well, transferring a lot of force. He was actually giving the criminal credit for feeling so good. Unbeknownst to the criminal was in charge of the dog, which is why we didn't need a handler there. Because the criminal was telling the dog, don't do it, don't do it. And the dog was fine with the barking, because that made sense to the doggy. So once I was, but you know, I didn't apply that to problem dogs. We get so into our little domains, we don't see how they transfer. So I used to have a dog, a kennel, and my helper would bring out a dog, and I'd have a dog. They want to fight. And you get a muzzle, the object was to get a muzzle to muzzle. And I understood prey instinct, but I hadn't developed the model yet. And I started doing hold at bay. I still hadn't made the connection. I kind of saw police dogs as got nothing to do with family dogs. And if one dog growled, man, that other dog's going to nail him. So just out of reflex, we correct both dogs. Because it was, boom, it was going to just go. It was like nitro. And one day, they're both getting so ready to go. And one of the dogs barks. And the other dog didn't go, but my helper and I, we both still jumped the dogs and yelled, you know, ah. But I said, geez, you know, that was weird. That other dog didn't go like I expected. So next time that happens, let's not do anything. Let's take a chance not to do anything. So I don't know when it was, a couple weeks later, a day later, I forget. Two dogs are there, they're muzzle to muzzle, they're bristling, and this time, bah! And we didn't do anything, we held our breath, we didn't do anything. You know what this one did? He stuck his nose in the snout and licked his lips. And then their tails started wagging. I said, wow, that was cool. Let's start teaching these dogs to bark. Then bingo, oh yeah, the police dogs. That's why they don't bite. Got it. So barking is super duper important. And first when you start training, a dog can be very heady, like that. And then little by little, when in order for him to drill down and give you a good bark, you will see he goes through the entire physical memory bank. He's going through his life history to get back. And notice, every puppy does a beautiful, clean, clear, metered bark, right? He wants something, he's playing, buff! It's always like that. And other dogs never take offense when they hear that bark. It's the growl that they know the ground is shifting. So that's the third one. The fourth one is highly technical. Belly rubs. And I don't even know how to draw that. So I'm just going to leave a blob there. Now what's important about that is a bad experience is characterized by a locked up shoulder assembly. Dogs carry tension at the very top of their shoulder blades. That's why they love to roll on the ground, on the back of their shoulders. They feel total relief, and up comes all the stored energy, and they feel energized. So doing a belly rub with the dog is, again, it's one of those circles on the rotation of the shoulders. It's teaching the dog. The willingness of a dog to do this has been misdefined as submission. Which would be like saying, if you go to a masseuse and roll over on your back, you're submitting to the masseuse. Right? But you're inducing the masseuse to bring pleasure. That's why dogs roll on their back when they're pro-social, when they really want it. But anyhow, this is a wonderful way of reducing tension. And the final thing is bite and carry. So if temperament, if you will, is a circle, and we have these 4 different behaviors, bite and carry is migrating along the circle to get to the core, to complete the whole deal. Or another way of saying that is the more the dog can grip and hold, the better he can hold on to a good feeling when all heck is breaking loose. That's the simple physical mechanics. And it brings back to the whole oral urge that he started life with and going from turbulence to flow. So the bite and carry it's like carrying the prey back to the village or the rabbit back to the den. It completes the emotional cycle and the dog feels whole. And practically speaking, he can hold on to a good feeling no matter what. That's the behavioral point of all these things. So this is teaching him. Now, how has this got anything to do with social? I'll try to wrap that point up for you. Is in any situation, any social engagement, remember I said that both dogs are a stimulus, therefore they're a force acting on the other one. Now, if his shoulders are locked up and he's projecting energy, and this one's locked up and he's projecting energy, sparks and fur is gonna fly. That's 2 cars coming at each other head on. That ain't good. So there's a thermodynamics to any time force moves in nature. It has to be absorbed and conducted. So if this guy is projecting force, this guy has to collect or absorb force. This is pro-social. If this one's shoulders are tight, this one can't wait to roll on the ground. This is pro-social. If 2 lock up, look out. Nature hates this worse than anything. It would rather these 2 guys fight than apathy. So 2 belly upperers, or 2 like I'm out of here, you're out of here, that means no work's going to get done. And that's like depression, existential dread. Nature doesn't like this at all. Did anybody remember the Terminator 3 movie when the young guy's having an emotional breakdown, he wants to kill himself or something, he's woe is me, and the Terminator like gets him mad, and he says, okay, that's good, we can deal with that. My psychological human program said, I get you mad, you're going to be able to cope just fine. So this mechanics of force transfer is the essence of sociability. So if you're projecting force, your dog learns to absorb force. He projects force, you learn to absorb force. He projects onto you and you collapse, so to speak, or we don't have to belly rub, we can just surrender to their pressure. We're absorbing them like we're belly up. Sometimes we're really like this, and they get the massage. So that's all it is, and once you get to that point, the test will be, can your touch absorb and conduct all the dog's energy? That means you've coupled forces. That's it. That's the goal. Now, if hunger is stronger than balance, the dog is sensual and aroused. And that's good. If balance is stronger than hunger, the dog is sensitive and stimulated. Which means he's knocked off balance and he doesn't like input. And that's problem behavior. So the two systems come together, hunger and balance, to make the animal minds. Notice, who won the Super Bowl last year? Indianapolis, no, Denver. Right. So what are they going to say this year if they don't win it? They're going to say, we weren't hungry enough. That's what they're going to say. Arnold wrote a book, Stay Hungry. So if hunger's stronger than balance, change is good. If balance is stronger than hunger, change is danger. So this is why I like a hungry dog. A hungry dog is a happy dog because he's just eating it up. He loves it. So anyway, the first step is, will the dog take food? Now there's things we can do to trigger it, but we'll start with that. So that's the overview. Does that, any questions? Does that make sense? Good. This is the first room I've never had to convert. I've never had to argue with anybody.
Can I ask a question about temperament?
Yeah.
I know you covered this last year, but for households that have multiple dogs, you talked about how if dogs grow up with other dogs, the temperament doesn't fully develop
Right.
all the way.
Right.
So if you're working with a dog that the temperament hasn't fully developed all the way, will the core work be able to bring that back to whole as if it was a puppy, or only...
Theoretically.
Meaning that when you're rehabbing a dog or we're working with a dog, that you can expect full rehabilitation with a dog that has grown up with another dog, or multiple dogs, or where the temperament...
Is he still living with multiple dogs?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, the living with multiple dogs will make it a lot more difficult because he's getting thousands of reps of the old way. Mm-hmm. But if you get a great bite, fight, and carry, that will start changing it. Okay. If he can overcome resistance, then it changes his perception. Also, if the owner becomes the ultimate charge, and one of the things that's deleterious is he's more into the other dogs than he is the owner. Obviously, he's feeding off the owner's attention, but that's not really being the charge. That's just feeding the charge. Temperament is a circle. It turns change into information. So if you have a mixed household of dogs, if one is over here, the other one will migrate over here against all learning theory. They have exact same experiences, the exact same, everybody's trying to be fair, especially these days, yet they become diametrically opposed. Matter of fact, if this is a friendly, happy-go-lucky, all of a sudden this one's bitey, he's nasty, because that's how he's fitting. You know, so you walk in a room and somebody states a real powerful principle, just by definition you want to play devil's advocate and argue against it. Just to bring, because your temperament's trying to balance it out. Whoa, he's got me way over here. Let me bring it over here. So temperament is a circle, and when you have dogs live together, they migrate to a default setting. This is where I feel safest. So like musical chairs. But, and I actually define these as above this east-west axis is active, below it is reactive. On this side of north is direct, and on this side is indirect. So we have these four quadrants, indirect, active. This is a really friendly dog. He's very easy to act indirectly, and he's active about it. That's your prototypical friendly, happy-go-lucky dog. Over here, you have indirect, reactive. This would be your most spooky dog. This would be a total fearful kind of dog. Always avoiding conflict, getting out of the way. reactive. He doesn't, you ask him to do something, he just holds back till he has to do something. He doesn't take the initiative. Over here we have direct, reactive. These are the ones that bite a lot of people. They're not out there looking for a fight, but if you go to approach them, bam, they can't be indirect. They can't get out of the way. And these are the direct and active. These are the ones that go straight at something actively. They're the ones running the joggers down. They're looking for a fight. Now, in any given situation, we're always migrating from one to the other. Right now, I'm in direct and active because I'm talking. But then if I have to listen, I have to become indirect and reactive. So in a conversation, you're constantly, I call them, we're emotional hermaphrodites. We're always flipping from one pole to the other. Male is talking, female's listening, then the woman acts male, talks, the man acts female, listens. So that's the real role of sexuality in nature, is to make these differences so that one can project, one can absorb, and then flip. So the object is a very socially confident dog. If he runs into a more brittle direct active, he'll go over here. And this one could have been brutalized and he's like uptight, but he can only do direct active. If you try to make that one, if you try to force him over there, you're damaging him. Because he doesn't have it in his repertoire. You can help him get it through collecting and pushing and barking, etc. But a pro-social dog, so back to your question is, let's say we got a damaged direct active dog and you're helping him, but he's not, there's a dog that lives over here all the time. So the stronger the owner gets as the center, then the less of a drag on the system that other dog is.
Which would mean, in order for that to be successful, the dog would have to spend much more time apart.
I would separate them a lot in the beginning, yeah. Which owners have troubles with because they think it's alienation or shunning, sequestering him. But when you raise a dog naturally, I always feel so good about putting a dog out of harm's way, because I just want to mold his mind and his body to be happy, and then before I put him into the fray. There's one pit bull that came to me. He was a hardy guy, but he was fearful. He bit people and attacked dogs. And the owners went away to Europe, and they wanted to know if I could keep him, so I kept him for the winter. And I built an insulated dog house, and I put it in the woods behind my house. He needed a detox from humans. So I put him behind the house. I visit him twice a day. First thing in the morning to let him out, give him water and food. Last thing at night to lock him, give him water, lock him back up. And he lived happily ever after in the Dakota building on Central Park West. What's that Art Deco building down there? The the one with the twin towers. But anyway, he lived in the middle of megalomania. Happy as could be, because he had that winter off, detoxing from all that attention. So at any rate, it's helpful to separate them. And what you do is, let's just say you could remove this situation, or remove the dog, is you start doing the flipping around to the various poles through the core exercises. So he gets cool with doing that. Also, he doesn't need to fight this dog so much anymore. It just doesn't take a vibe from him like it didn't cut to the quick like it used to. That's the healing part. But I will say it's really difficult with two dogs. I'm a one-dog man. It's hard for me to do more than one, but a lot of people are much more social than that. They can do more than one, but it's hard work for the dogs because you're dividing up a pie, and it's making it harder for them to be flexible. But the goal is to migrate and to go to all these states. So even this one, when it gets to the moment of the kill, he sinks his teeth into the back of that moose as hard as he can. He becomes direct and active. Now, if you were to ask any of those wolves, which one of you is the leader? They'd say, I am. No, no, no. If I didn't get him in the tail, you never would have gotten the nose grip. No, no. If I didn't pinch him in the flank, we never would have spun him. He never would have made a run for it. So if dogs could think about leadership, they'd all think they were the leader. The straw that stirs the drink. So there is no concept of a leadership in nature. It's a human construct. There's only the charge. Whoever has the most charge is in charge. That's the key. So the question is for us to become the charge that moves well. We conduct the dog's energy really well. Then he's happy. That's all he wants. Now, he doesn't care what happens when what happens happens. He only cares what he feels when what happens happens. So if my dog sees a deer and I get him into push of war with a bite toy and he overpowers me and I love him up, that's what killing a deer feels like. He doesn't need to kill that deer to get to the conclusion of an emotional cycle. When he gets that, oh, this doesn't do it. You get that snap at the back. So when oh, there you go. If I bring him to that point of culmination, he feels he killed that deer. I'll give you a case in point. I'm mowing my fields. It's May, and I make a couple passes around the field. Now I got about 15 feet mowed at the edge of the field, and a doe must have dropped a fawn. And he wanders out into the cut spot, and I'm making my next pass, and the Hessian is always with me with the tractor, and I see the fawn. I said, this is fantastic. How many times can I get this thing? I've done the prep. He's a young male. He's 2 years old or 1.5. He bites like an alligator. He's full of fire. I mean, he goes through a wall to get the bite. So I keep the tractor running, I get off the tractor, I go to the wall nearby, I pick up a stick, and I throw it at the fawn. I show Hessian, I throw it right at the fawn. The stick hits near the fawn's tail, he goes flying into the woods. Hessian is running at it, goes right for the stick, comes back, and we beat the heck out of each other. I plat him up, he gives me the stick, I put it on the wall again. I mowed for hours. The fawn came back out. Hessian duly followed the tractor, never even looked at the fawn, could care less the fawn was over there, because the fawn was dead. I mean, if a wolf tracks a caribou back to the herd, and they don't get that caribou, do they care? No, as long as they end up feeling they got a caribou. They don't care which one. No, wait a minute, that was the one we tracked. We didn't get him. Oh, shit. We got to go back. You know, the best way to appreciate it is, let's say you live in your home state and you play the lottery. And you win the $1 million lottery. You live in New York State and you watch this, you're attracted to Albany. Albany is where they had the lottery, and you see your number, you won. And for some arcane financial reason, it's all one thing, a lottery commission, they call you up from Newark and says, hey, you got to come to Newark. The Newark Lottery Commission is going to pay you $1 million. Do you care? No. If it feels like $1 million, now what if it doesn't feel like $1 million? What if it's $990,000? Yeah, you're great on the way there, and you start thinking about it. Now, pretty soon you're pretty mad. Where's that $10,000? Albany said I had $1 million. How come I only got 10,000? So your dog comes back and you give him a cookie and you give him love and a thing. But if it's only 990,000, there's a part of him saying, wait a minute, that's not what $1 million feels like if I got that deer. So 100 good boys, good boys, good boys, 2 years later, your dog takes after that deer. 2 years later, it all goes out the window. So that's why the core exercise is so important, because it's getting the prey and bringing it to ground and hitting the stop signal. Once I saw my dad's shepherd, Rowe, he's a great woodchuck hunter. I'll never forget this. This is an indelible impression, and we let him hunt woodchucks. They were wiping out a garden. We had horses and cows break their legs in a hole. You can't have woodchucks on a farm. And I saw Rommel get one, and he shook it. And I heard the back snap. It was 10 feet in the air. And it came down limp, and then Rommel just walked away. Done. That was it. So when you get to the completion, now look at, that's the last 0.01%. And if you don't get control of 100%, if you got 99.9% control, you got control over nothing. It's all out the window. So that last little bit, I call it deep inner stress, that is most tightly held, physical memory accretes around the center of gravity. If you'll accept the premise that moving well is the basis of all well-being, what's the key to moving well? What is the number one part of the body-mind around which the body and mind must configure in order to be moving well? It is the center of gravity. So when we go further into the model, the dog has, whenever a dog's looking out, he's looking into the center of gravity. Especially if you accept the premise, the mother's a force that knocks him off balance, the stimulus knocks him off balance, that right away he feels it in his center of gravity. And that is the energy held closest to the center of gravity is that last 0.01%. That's what we need, that last 0.01%. That's what all this is designed, is get us to the core. So I like to say the center of gravity is the basis of cognition, not some nervous brain module. It's the cog in the wheel, quite literally. When you see those dogs doing perfectly like that. Now, how does a dog track a center of gravity in motion? There's a third brain. The brain and the brain, now the brain in the head, the big brain in the head, central nervous system, I call the brain of separation. The enteric nervous system, little brain in the gut, I call the social brain. The third brain is in the heart. I call that the network brain. So when you go back and forth with the dog, you recreate a state of suspension that I referenced earlier in moving well. And now the dog actually feels weightless from physical memory. It's a hard thing to get our minds around. But you'll notice everything people do is to get high. We even use the word, get high. You fall in love, you say, my feet never touch the ground. My head is in the clouds, walking on air. The goal of all behavior is to get to weightlessness. That's how you know you've moved that last 0.01%. That's how you know you're not confused. That's when your compass points true north. So our goal is when I mentioned those shoulders are perfectly rotating, that's when they're tracking the other dog or person through their heart energy. My theory is when the muscles of the shoulders are relaxed, the breathing gets rhythmic, they feel like they're running at full speed, therefore they're in a state of well-being, therefore their vagal tone changes, their heart pulse rate, not pulse rate, variable rate changes. And they're having a good experience. So the goal is, and only this network brain can resolve that last 0.01%. It's got to be in a state of suspension. Have you ever gone, like you might know of some historical figure or even a movie star and you don't like them? You don't like the history person, you don't like the movie star, particular actor, and then you go to a movie and of course the movie portrays the person sympathetically and the actor does this amazing job and you project into that storyline and you feel the ups and the downs, you go up and you go down, and then boom, it has this resolution and a whole lifetime of built up associative value to that historical figure or that actor changes like that. All of a sudden, wow, I didn't know the actor had that range. That's unbelievable. Now you like that actor, or you have sympathy for that historical figure who you thought was a bad guy. But you projected into him, and they moved it, and you felt weightless. So all emotional experience is to get to weightlessness. And that's what the core exercises allow the dog to do, is to feel weightless. Therefore, you are now an extension of his body. So it's a theory of body, not a theory of mind. So let me just leave on this, or make this one final point. If we could ask a dog, how do you move a limb? I don't know, if you ask a kid, I mean, a kid doesn't know about neurons, synapses, motor reflexes. If you ask a kid when they could talk about it, I don't know, I just want to go. You know, they wouldn't have an answer to it. But they don't know about neurons or things, but do they have any comprehension of how they move a limb? Because they certainly know how to move limbs articulately, right, and delicately, and with nuance, and with the purposiveness. What would a dog say? What would an animal say? How do you move a limb? How do others move their limbs? My theory is they would say, by how I breathe. So if you were tasked with, you have to knock over this big rock, it's doable. What would you do? You get your center of gravity in position, and before you push, you would do what? You'd hold your breath. Concentrate as much force. So if you were to ask a dog, how'd you do that? He'd say, I blew it. I huffed and I puffed and I blew it down. That's what he'd say. So if we can get a dog breathing well, then that means what he's attracted to, that's why it's moving the way it's moving. In other words, he feels he's moving it by his breath, which means it's an extension of his body, which means he can no more bite it than he would bite his own body. We're done. That's all I'm saying. To get him back to the feeling that my breath controls the world. That's what we're doing. That's why the bark is so powerful. You're allowing him to feel that vocal, that lung turbulent pressure into cyclic, rhythmic. So that's how simple it is. That's how simple it is. But it only took 40 years to kind of break it down. So I hope you sleep on it. Feel free to sleep on it, I mean. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. Get them breathing again. So they don't have any concept, your mind relative to their mind. That goes back to the static point. I want to reemphasize that. If you're trying to think, what are they thinking? We're already off track. What are they feeling? Well, that's breath, that's tension, muscle tension. And they can read your life history by how you're breathing, how you're deporting. They get it perfectly. That's what they're doing. So we're going to try to do the opposite. As crudely as we can do it, we're going to go the opposite. Or we're going to return the favor, do our part. Nate.